Congratulations. Your being reassigned to the humans becomes a death sentence when space pirates attack the Aprillian with advanced weapons. As systems fail and self-destruct looms, Captain Arlian shatters his sacred directive. Observe only. Do not interfere. Sharing forbidden Alliance technology to save the human crew, forever changing his destiny and understanding of what truly matters. The message blinked in Captain Arlian's neural interface, with the cheerful banality of bureaucratic inevitability. Congratulations. You are being reassigned to HAX-17, the Human Observation Unit. Arlian stared out the viewport of Hestia 2 orbital station, his four-fingered hand twitching involuntarily. The vast emptiness of space had always provided him comfort, its predictable patterns and mathematical precision, a reflection of how he preferred his life to function. Order, protocol, certainty. Humans offered none of these things. The Galactic Alliance, year 2425 by human reckoning, had only reluctantly admitted Earth's chaotic offspring after the Great Technological Crisis 70 years prior. Most species had lost decades of advancement during that catastrophe, but humans had somehow thrived, cobbling together solutions that defied conventional engineering principles, but worked nonetheless. And now, the Alliance monitoring system had detected traces of covert human communication with an ultra-sophisticated species beyond monitored space, which meant someone had to observe them more closely. That someone, apparently, was now him. Captain, his assistant Krelvor chirped from the doorway, antennae vibrating with obvious excitement. Your new credentials have arrived. The human vessel Aprillian will be entering Alliance-controlled space in 14 standard cycles. Thank you, Arlian replied, smoothing down his uniform with methodical precision. Have all previous observation reports been transferred to my station? Yes, sir. Though I must say, the human files are peculiar. Peculiar how? Arlian turned, one eyebrow ridge raising slightly. They're annotated extensively. Previous observers seem to have added personal comments. Krelvor's voice dropped to a whisper. One even wrote "logic does not apply" across an entire tactical assessment. Arlian suppressed a shudder. This was precisely what concerned him. His 20-cycle career had been built on meticulous adherence to protocol, detailed analysis, and accurate prediction of behaviors. He had risen through the ranks of the Alliance monitoring system by being the most reliable observer of 12 different species. Humans, however, were renowned for being unpredictable. Their historical records were filled with improbable victories, technological innovations that shouldn't work but did, and social structures that evolved at rates that made anthropological models obsolete before they could be completed. I will maintain objective standards regardless of the subject species, he stated firmly, more to convince himself than his assistant. Forward the mission parameters to my quarters. I will begin preparations immediately. As Krelvor departed, Arlian activated his desk terminal, calling up the official assignment. Alliance Monitoring System. Classification, confidential. Officer, Captain Arlian, Intelligence Division. Mission, observation of human vessel, Aprillian. Duration, indefinite. Objective, monitor and report on human behavioral patterns, communication methods, and potential Alliance security concerns. Special directive, observe only, do not interfere. The last line was highlighted in red, a standard warning for all monitoring missions, but emphasized for human assignments. Previous observers had noted a troubling tendency to become involved with human affairs. Arlian would not make the same mistake. His career advancement depended on maintaining professional distance. The rumored position on the High Monitoring Council would never be his if he allowed himself to be compromised by human unpredictability. He tapped his terminal again, bringing up Humans 101, the basic introductory file. Images of the bipedal creatures scrolled past, diverse in coloration and physical attributes. but all displaying the same unsettling forward-facing eyes and expressive faces. The preliminary briefing was not encouraging. Humans operate on intuition as often as logic, making their decision-making processes difficult to predict or model. They form strong social bonds quickly and often prioritize these bonds over regulations or self-preservation. Note: 78% of human fictional entertainment involves violation of protocols to save companions. Arlian scoffed. How had such a species survived long enough to achieve interstellar travel? The next section was even more perplexing. Despite technological capabilities far below many Alliance species, humans have developed unique applications of existing technologies. Warning: human modifications often bypass safety protocols, yet achieve functionality through methods that defy conventional engineering. A video file attached to the report showed a human repairing a quantum oscillator with what appeared to be adhesive tape and a cooking implement. The repair had lasted through 3 gravity jumps before being properly replaced. Arlian closed the file with a gesture that was perhaps more forceful than necessary. He would need to prepare himself more thoroughly before making contact. Humans would not compromise his perfect record of detached observation. The station's communication alert chimed, and his terminal displayed an incoming transmission from Earth's solar system. "Accept," he commanded, straightening his posture to regulation perfection. The screen flickered, revealing a human face. Male, based on the facial hair patterning, with dark skin and eyes that crinkled at the corners in what Arlian recognized as an expression of amusement. "Captain Arlian? I'm Captain Bennett of the Aprillian. Thought I'd reach out before you join us. Always good to know who's going to be watching your every move." The human's mouth curved upward in what humans called a smile, but the expression didn't quite reach his eyes. "Captain Bennett," Arlian acknowledged stiffly. "I am simply an observer for the Alliance monitoring system. My presence should not impact your operations." Bennett leaned forward, the camera capturing the casual way he rested his elbows on what must be a command console, a posture that would earn severe reprimands on any Alliance vessel. "Yeah, about that. We've had observers before. They tend to get, let's say, involved. One ended up helping us negotiate with the Vrex hive mind. Another started a bar fight on Proxima Station." The human's expression shifted to something more serious. "Just so we're clear, my ship, my rules. You can observe all you want, but the safety of my crew comes first. I assure you, Captain, I have no intention of interfering in any way. The directive is quite clear." "They always say that," Bennett murmured, then straightened. "We'll be docking at Hestia Transfer Point in 13 days. Your quarters are being prepared according to Alliance biological specifications." Arlian nodded. "I appreciate the accommodation." "One more thing," Bennett added, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. "We've been informed that the AMS is concerned about some of our communications. Let me save you some time. We talk to everyone. It's kind of our thing. If the Alliance has specific concerns, they should address them directly rather than sending spies." "I am an observer, not a spy," Arlian corrected automatically. Bennett's smile returned. Genuine this time. "Same difference where I come from. See you in 13 days. Observer." The transmission ended before Arlian could respond. The captain stared at the blank screen, a sense of unease settling in his abdomen. 13 days to prepare for a mission unlike any he had undertaken before. 13 days to steel himself against human unpredictability. He had the distinct feeling it wouldn't be enough. Duh. Over the next 13 days, Arlian immersed himself in human studies with the same methodical approach he applied to all his assignments. He reviewed historical records, cultural analyses, technological assessments, and previous observation reports. The picture that emerged was both fascinating and disturbing. Humans had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times, yet had always pulled back from the brink through what the reports described as desperate innovation and improbable cooperation. Their history was a chaotic series of conflicts and alliances, technological leaps and devastating setbacks. Most puzzling was their approach to rules. Unlike most alliance species, who viewed regulations as the foundation of civilization, humans seemed to regard them as suggestions, guidelines to be followed until they became inconvenient. The great technological crisis that had devastated most spacefaring civilizations 70 years ago had barely slowed humanity's expansion. While other species had retreated to core worlds and focused on rebuilding according to established protocols, humans had adapted, improvised, and emerged with technologies that worked on principles some Alliance scientists still couldn't explain. It was this adaptability that made them valuable allies, and potentially dangerous ones. On the morning of his departure, Arlean packed his few personal belongings and stood before the viewport one last time. Hestia the Sioux's controlled environment and predictable routines had been his home for 3 years. The thought of exchanging it for a human vessel filled with chaotic biologicals made his skin prickle with anxiety. "Your shuttle is ready, Captain," Krelvor announced from the doorway. "Thank you." Arlean smoothed his uniform one final time. "Has the Council approved my observation parameters?" "Yes, sir. Standard protocol with one addition." The assistant handed him a small data crystal. "You're to pay particular attention to any communication methods or technologies that might bypass Alliance monitoring systems." Arlean slipped the crystal into his uniform pocket. "Of course. If I may speak freely, sir." Arlean nodded, curious. Krelvor rarely offered personal observations. The previous observer assigned to the humans requested transfer after only 30 cycles. He said. The assistant hesitated, antennae twitching nervously. "He said they changed him, made him question things he shouldn't question." "Rest assured, I am not so easily influenced," Arlean replied firmly. "My record speaks for itself." "Of course, sir." Krelvor didn't sound convinced. "Safe journey." The shuttle ride to the transfer point was brief and unremarkable, exactly as Arlean preferred all travel to be. As they approached the docking bay, however, he got his first glimpse of the Aprillian and found himself momentarily speechless. The human vessel was unlike any Alliance ship he'd seen, where Alliance design favored symmetry and clean lines. The Aprillian was a peculiar amalgamation of shapes and protrusions. Its hull bore evidence of multiple repairs and modifications, some clearly made with materials not originally intended for spacecraft construction. Yet, despite its patchwork appearance, the ship moved with surprising grace as it maneuvered into docking position. A small reception committee awaited him at the airlock, 3 humans in what he recognized as their naval uniforms, though they wore them with a casualness that would never be tolerated in Alliance forces. "Captain Arlean," the central figure greeted him, extending a hand in the human custom of physical contact greeting. "Captain Daniel Bennett, welcome aboard the Aprillian." Arlean hesitated only briefly before accepting the handshake. Having studied the protocol, the human's grip was firm, but not aggressive. "Thank you, Captain Bennett. I appreciate your accommodation. This is my XO, Commander Rivera." Bennett indicated a shorter human with facial features, suggesting genetic heritage from Earth's eastern regions. "And Lieutenant Sato, our chief engineer." The third human, a female with close-cropped hair and intelligent eyes, nodded briskly. "A pleasure," Arlean said automatically. "I look forward to observing your operations." Lieutenant Sato made a sound that Arlean's translator didn't catch, but Bennett's warning glance suggested it wasn't entirely polite. "Lieutenant Sato has prepared your quarters according to Alliance specifications," Bennett said smoothly. "She'll show you there now. We're scheduled to break orbit in 3 hours. I'd like you on the bridge for departure procedures." "Of course." As Sato led him through the corridors of the Aprillian, Arlean found himself cataloging differences from Alliance vessels. The ship was surprisingly spacious by comparison, with wider corridors and higher ceilings. Environmental controls seemed set for slightly cooler temperatures than Alliance standard. Most noticeably, there were human personal touches everywhere, images affixed to walls, plants growing in small containers, and objects that appeared to have no functional purpose displayed prominently. "So you're here to spy on us," Sato said abruptly as they turned down another corridor. "I am an observer, not a spy," Arlian corrected, just as he had with Bennett. Sato snorted. "What's the difference?" "A spy operates covertly and with intent to gather confidential information. I am here openly, with your government's permission, to observe general behavioral patterns and interactions." "Sure." She stopped before a door. "These are your quarters. Environmental controls are adjusted to Alliance standards. The terminal connects to our non-classified systems. If you need anything, just use the comm panel." She gestured to a device on the wall. "Thank you, Lieutenant." She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable to his limited understanding of human facial cues. "Word of advice. Observer. Don't get in the way during emergencies. Humans move fast when things go wrong." Before he could respond, she turned and strode away, leaving him to contemplate her warning as he entered his quarters. The room was surprisingly adequate. A sleeping platform designed to accommodate his species' spine structure, appropriate atmospheric settings, and a workstation configured to Alliance specifications. There was even a small viewing port, currently showing the curve of Hestia 2 below. Arlian unpacked methodically, arranging his few possessions with precision. The data crystal from Krelvor he secured in his personal encrypted storage unit. Then, he activated his neural interface and began recording his initial observations. Day 1 aboard human vessel Aprillian. Initial impressions. Ship design prioritizes crew comfort over efficiency. Significant deviations from Alliance engineering standards noted in propulsion housing and life support distribution. Human crew demonstrates casual approach to protocol and hierarchy. Captain Bennett maintains authority despite informal interactions with subordinates. He paused, considering. Lieutenant Sato displays suspicion toward observation mission. Will monitor for potential obstruction. 3 hours later. Arlian stood on the bridge of the Aprillian as it prepared to break orbit. Unlike the sterile, precise environment of Alliance bridges, this one hummed with conversation and movement. Crew members called information to each other casually, occasionally using terminology his translator struggled with, idioms and slang that had no direct equivalents. Captain Bennett occupied a central chair, but frequently rose to move among his officers, checking displays and engaging in brief conversations that often included what Arlian recognized as humor. The captain's leadership style was unlike anything taught in Alliance command training, yet the crew responded with obvious efficiency and respect. "Gravitational moorings disengaged," reported a young human at what appeared to be the navigation console. "All systems green," added another. "Propulsion at standby." Bennett nodded. "Take us out. Mr. Park, standard departure protocol." "Aye, sir. Though..." The navigator hesitated, glancing at a display. "Orbital traffic control suggests vector adjustment for scheduled cargo transport." "Noted. Adjust course accordingly." Arlian observed with professional interest. The Alliance would have provided exact coordinates and timing for any course adjustment. The humans seemed comfortable with approximate guidance. The ship hummed as engines engaged, a vibration that felt different from Alliance drives. Less precise, somehow, but with a deeper resonance that suggested raw power. "We're clear," Park announced. "Setting course for the Antares corridor." "Very good." Bennett finally acknowledged Arlian's presence with a nod. "Captain, this is your first time on a human vessel, correct?" "Yes. I have previously observed Gremlin trade ships and Vostok exploration vessels." "Well, we do things a bit differently. You're welcome on the bridge during standard operations, but if we go to alert status, You'll need to return to your quarters unless I specify otherwise. Safety protocols. Understood. My directive is to observe without interference. Bennett's expression shifted subtly. About that, I've read the Alliance directive. But just so we're clear, if something's on fire, you have permission to mention it. Or if you see something that might kill us all, feel free to speak up. We're practical that way. Several bridge officers chuckled, and Arlian realized he was missing some nuance of human communication. I will keep that in mind. Good. Lieutenant Sato will give you a tour of non-restricted areas after her shift. I suggest you take the opportunity. Understanding how we operate might make your reports more accurate. That would be acceptable. Arlian agreed, though, in truth, he was uncertain about spending more time with the suspicious engineer. As the Aprillian accelerated toward open space, Arlian found himself studying the human crew more than the ship operations. They communicated constantly, not just about their duties, but about personal matters, making references his translator flagged as cultural and historical, without providing context. They touched each other frequently, pats on shoulders, casual hand gestures, even what appeared to be ritualized hand-slapping when tasks were completed successfully. Such physical contact was rare among Alliance species outside of familial or mate bonds. Most intriguing was the way they seamlessly switched between strict professionalism when addressing ship functions and casual familiarity in between. It was as though they inhabited two worlds simultaneously, the structured environment of a military vessel and the informal community of a small settlement. Arlian made careful notes of these observations, already composing the first of what would be many reports to the Alliance monitoring system. Humans were indeed as complex as the briefings had suggested. Their contradictions were both fascinating and concerning. As promised, Lieutenant Sato appeared at the end of her shift to provide a tour of the vessel. Her demeanor remained cool, but she answered his questions with surprising thoroughness. This is our primary recreation area, she explained, leading him into a large compartment filled with various equipment and seating arrangements. A group of off-duty crew members were engaged in some form of physical competition involving a small sphere and horizontal targets. You encourage physical activity during leisure periods, Arlian noted. Humans need it. We evolved to move, not sit at consoles all day. Sato gestured toward another section where crew members manipulated holographic images. Gaming section there. VR simulations, strategy games, some historical reenactments. For entertainment? Entertainment, stress relief, skill development, she shrugged. Play is how we learn. Arlian filed this information away. Alliance species generally separated leisure activities from skill acquisition, considering them distinct purposes. The tour continued through hydroponic sections, mess halls, and what Sato called common areas, spaces with no apparent function except for crew members to gather and talk. And this, she said as they approached a sealed doorway with unusual markings, is the crucible. Crucible. His translator offered several meanings, all involving intense heat or pressure. Survival challenge chamber, voluntary training facility for extreme conditions. A hint of pride entered her voice. Captain Bennett had it installed after the Proxima incident. We simulate everything from atmospheric degradation to gravity failure. Arlian's interest sharpened. This is for emergency preparation? Partly. It's also, she seemed to search for words. It's how we test ourselves, push our limits. Some crew members run scenarios daily. Fascinating. Arlian studied the door markings more carefully, noting what appeared to be a ranking system of some kind. Is this mandatory training? Voluntary, Sato repeated. But pretty much everyone participates. Nobody wants to be the one who freezes when things go wrong. The concept was both alien and oddly familiar. Alliance forces conducted mandatory emergency drills. Of course. But they were structured, predictable. This seemed more like play, but with potentially lethal consequences. "Would it be possible to observe a session?" he asked. Something like approval flickered across Sato's face. "I'm running the atmospheric degradation scenario tomorrow at 0800. You can watch from the observation booth." "I would appreciate that." The tour concluded at his quarters, where Sato paused before leaving. "One more thing. The mess hall is open 24/7. Humans eat at different times. The synthesizers are programmed with Alliance-compatible nutrition, but the chef can prepare something specifically if you have preferences." "Thank you, Lieutenant. Your thoroughness is commendable." She gave him an odd look. "Just doing my job, observer. See you tomorrow." As the door closed behind her, Arlian settled at his workstation to record the day's observations. The Aprillian was unlike any vessel he had studied before, a curious blend of military discipline and communal living that defied easy categorization. The humans themselves remained puzzling. Their casual disregard for formal protocols existed alongside obvious competence and dedication to their duties. They seemed to operate on principles that were simultaneously less rigid and more demanding than Alliance standards. Most perplexing was their apparent comfort with uncertainty. Where Alliance species sought to eliminate variables and standardize responses, humans seemed to deliberately introduce unpredictability into their training and operations. Arlian found himself both professionally intrigued and personally unsettled by these contradictions. His mission would clearly be more complex than anticipated. As he prepared for rest cycle, he reviewed his directive once more. Observe only. Do not interfere. Simple words, a clear boundary. He had no way of knowing how impossible that boundary would become. The following weeks aboard the Aprillian provided Arlian with a wealth of observational data, much of it contradictory to established Alliance understanding of effective ship operations. As promised, Lieutenant Sato had allowed him to observe the Crucible training session, where she and 5 other crew members voluntarily subjected themselves to gradually decreasing oxygen levels while attempting to repair a simulated life support system. The simulation ended only when the last participant lost consciousness, a scenario that would violate multiple safety protocols in Alliance training. Yet, when the participants revived, they immediately engaged in analysis of their performance, discussing improvements with enthusiasm despite having just experienced what amounted to controlled suffocation. "You find this enjoyable?" Arlian had asked one young ensign, who was still catching his breath. "Not exactly enjoyable," the human had replied, grinning despite obvious physical discomfort. "Satisfying. Knowing I lasted 30 seconds longer than last time. Knowing I might survive if it happens for real. This willingness, even eagerness, to experience discomfort for potential future benefit was a recurring theme in human behavior. They exercised to the point of pain, consumed stimulants to delay necessary rest cycles, and deliberately exposed themselves to calculated risks during both work and leisure periods. Captain Bennett, Arlian discovered, ran the most difficult Crucible scenarios weekly, often alone. When questioned about this practice, the captain had simply said, "I can't ask my crew to face what I won't face myself." Such an approach to leadership was alien to Alliance hierarchy, where senior officers were considered too valuable to risk unnecessarily. Yet Arlian could not deny the effect it had on crew loyalty and morale. His daily reports to the Alliance monitoring system grew increasingly detailed, focusing particularly on the communication patterns that had initially triggered concern. Humans communicated constantly through official channels, personal devices, and face-to-face interactions that often used references and linguistic shortcuts his translator could only approximate. There was, however, no evidence of the suspected covert communication with ultra-sophisticated species. If anything, humans seemed almost compulsively transparent, documenting their activities in multiple formats and freely sharing information that Alliance species would consider private. Arlian's integration into ship routines progressed slowly, but steadily. While never fully accepted as one of them, he found the crew increasingly willing to explain their behaviors and include him in non-critical activities. He observed their meal rituals, entertainment preferences, and work patterns. He documented their tendency to personalize equipment, modify standard procedures, and create informal problem-solving networks that operated alongside the official chain of command. Most fascinating was their approach to technology, where Alliance engineers followed precise specifications and established protocols. Human technicians frequently improvised, making adjustments based on what they called feel rather than calculations. Lieutenant Sato, in particular, treated the ship's engines like living entities, speaking to them and making intuitive adjustments that had no basis in Alliance engineering principles, yet produced measurable efficiency improvements. "The specs are just a starting point," she explained, when he questioned her methodology. "Every ship has its own personality, I guess. You have to listen to what it's telling you." "The ship speaks to you?" Arlian asked carefully, wondering if he had discovered evidence of the suspected advanced technology. Sato laughed. "Not literally, but when you work with a system long enough, you develop a feel for it. The vibrations, the sound patterns, the response times, they all tell you something if you pay attention." It was a concept that had no equivalent in Alliance engineering, where predictability and standardization were paramount. By the fourth week of his assignment, Arlian found himself reluctantly adjusting his own behaviors to accommodate human patterns. He began taking meals in the common mess hall rather than his quarters, participating in question-and-answer sessions about Alliance species when invited, and even attending what they called movie nights, communal viewings of human narrative entertainment that, while often perplexing, provided insight into their cultural values. It was during one such routine day, as the Aprillian cruised through a relatively quiet sector of Alliance space, that the incident occurred, which would ultimately challenge everything Arlian understood about his mission and himself. The day began unremarkably. Arlian was observing bridge operations, making notes on the casual efficiency with which the crew handled a minor navigational adjustment to avoid a previously unmapped debris field. Captain Bennett was reviewing reports at his station when Lieutenant Ramos, the environmental systems officer, suddenly straightened in his chair. "Captain, I'm getting anomalous readings from the portside atmospheric processing unit." Bennett looked up. "Define anomalous." "Filtration efficiency dropping, now at 87%. Diagnostic shows this can't be right." Ramos frowned at his display. "It's showing microscopic particulates in the return flow, possibly metallic." The captain moved to the environmental station, studying the readings over Ramos's shoulder. Arlian followed, careful to maintain an unobtrusive position while still able to observe. "Could be sensor malfunction," Bennett suggested. "Running secondary diagnostics now." Ramos's fingers moved across his controls. "Secondary confirms primary. We have particulate contamination." And his expression changed. "Efficiency now at 83% and dropping." Bennett straightened. "Commander Rivera, coordinate with engineering. I want a team at that processing unit 5 minutes ago. Ramos, isolate affected sections if possible." "Already on it, sir. Sealing compartments 17 through 24 on Deck C." Arlian observed with professional interest as the humans switched seamlessly from routine operations to emergency response. There was no panic, no confusion, just focused intensity and rapid communication. "Sato here," came the engineer's voice over the communication system. "I've got 2 teams heading to the processor. Initial readings suggest possible microfracture in the purification chamber. Could be releasing filter material into the air supply." "Toxic?" Bennett asked sharply. "Unknown at this stage. Recommend breathing apparatus for anyone in adjacent sections until we identify the particulates. Implemented, Rivera confirmed from her station. Medical is standing by. Arlian noted that no one had consulted emergency protocols or requested authorization from higher authority. Each officer simply acted within their area of responsibility, coordinating organically with minimal explicit direction from the captain. Ramos, Bennett said, go assist Sato. You know those systems better than anyone. Aye, sir. The lieutenant vacated his station, moving with urgent purpose rather than panic. Arlian hesitated, then stepped forward. Captain, would it be permissible for me to observe the repair operations? This incident provides valuable data on emergency response procedures. Bennett gave him a measuring look. Stay out of the way, and follow all safety directives immediately. No questions, no delays. Understood. And observer, Bennett added, as Arlian turned to follow Ramos. Remember your directive. Observe only. The warning was unnecessary, but Arlian nodded acknowledgement before following the environmental officer to the affected section. The corridor outside the atmospheric processor was already busy with activity. Crew members in breathing apparatus were establishing a perimeter, while Sato and her team were removing access panels from a large wall-mounted unit. Filtration chamber is compromised, Sato reported, as Ramos joined them. Getting microscopic shearing of the molecular sieves. The particulates are entering the clean air stream. Toxicity, Ramos asked. Donning protective gear? Low-level irritant at current concentrations. Nothing immediately dangerous. But we can't let it continue. She handed him a diagnostic tool. I need to know if we can bypass this unit without losing too much processing capacity. Arlian positioned himself where he could observe, without obstructing. Fascinated by the methodical, yet urgent way the humans addressed the problem. There was no reference to manuals or protocols, yet each person seemed to understand their role in the repair process. We can route through the secondary processors on Deck B, Ramos said, after studying the system. We'll lose about 20% efficiency, but it'll maintain safe atmospheric levels while we replace this unit. Agreed. Park, start the bypass sequence. Chen, prep a replacement filtration chamber. The team moved with practiced efficiency, rerouting systems and preparing replacement parts. Arlian recorded everything, noting particularly how they adapted standard procedures to the specific situation without apparent hesitation. Then, Lieutenant Ramos swayed suddenly, one hand going to his throat. Ramos, Sato turned sharply. What's wrong? I'm fine. Just... He coughed, a harsh sound even through the breathing apparatus. Just lightheaded suddenly. Sato gestured to another crew member. Get him to medical, now. I can finish, Ramos protested, but his words dissolved into another coughing fit. Not up for debate. Go. Sato's tone left no room for argument. As Ramos was led away, she turned to another engineer. Finish the bypass sequence. I'll complete the diagnostics. Arlian found himself stepping forward before he had consciously decided to do so. Lieutenant Sato, I have observed that Lieutenant Ramos's symptoms began approximately 30 seconds after he removed the internal sensor array for inspection. Sato looked at him sharply. What are you suggesting? The casing showed discoloration consistent with thermal stress. It is possible that when he handled it, residual particulates transferred to his gloves and subsequently to his breathing apparatus when he adjusted it. For a moment, Sato stared at him, and Arlian feared he had overstepped his observer role. Then she nodded briskly. Chen, check everyone's gear. Look for contamination, especially around seal points. She tapped her communication device. Medical. This is Sato. Ramos may have direct exposure to filter particulates. Check for respiratory tract irritation. The acknowledgement from medical was immediate, and Arlian felt a curious sensation in his abdomen. Something like satisfaction, yet different. He had provided potentially useful information without directly interfering in ship operations. His directive remained intact. The repair proceeded efficiently after that, with additional precautions taken to prevent further contamination. When the replacement unit was installed and tested, Sato dismissed her team to decontamination procedures, then turned to Arlian. "That was good observation work," she said, her tone neutral, but not unfriendly. "Ramos might have gotten a lot worse if we hadn't identified the exposure route quickly. I merely noted a temporal correlation," Arlian replied, uncomfortable with the implied praise. It seemed potentially relevant to the situation. "It was—" She studied him for a moment. "You're not what I expected." "In what way?" "You actually pay attention. The last observer we had was more interested in finding fault than understanding how we operate." She began gathering her tools. "Medical reports Ramos will be fine. By the way, some irritation of the respiratory tract, but no permanent damage." "That is good to hear." And it was. Arlian realized he had developed a certain respect for the efficient environmental officer over the past weeks. As they walked back toward the main sections of the ship, Sato glanced at him. "So, what will you put in your report about this incident?" Arlian considered carefully. "I will note the efficient emergency response, the adaptive problem-solving approach, and the effective leadership demonstrated at multiple levels of command. Nothing about non-standard procedures, or how we didn't consult the official Alliance emergency protocols. I will note that your methods, while divergent from Alliance standards, were effective for the specific situation and crew composition." A slight smile crossed Sato's face. "Maybe you're learning something after all, observer." Back in his quarters that evening, Arlian composed his daily report with meticulous attention to detail. He described the atmospheric processor incident, the response procedures, and the successful resolution. He noted the crew's ability to adapt standard procedures to the specific emergency without compromising safety or efficiency. What he did not include was his own small contribution to the identification of Ramos's exposure route. It seemed unnecessary to the overall assessment, a minor detail in a complex situation. It was only later, as he prepared for rest cycle, that he realized he had made a decision about what to include and what to omit in an official report. Such selective reporting was not typical of his usual methodical approach. The humans, it seemed, were affecting him after all. The weeks that followed the atmospheric processor incident brought subtle but significant changes to Arlian's position aboard the Aprillian. The crew, particularly Lieutenant Sato's engineering team, began to treat him with a new level of acceptance. They explained systems more willingly, answered his questions with greater detail, and occasionally even sought his observations on technical matters. Captain Bennett, too, seemed to reassess the observer's role. During his 6th week aboard, Arlian was surprised when the captain invited him to participate in senior staff meetings as a cultural advisor on Alliance perspectives. "Your directive prohibits interference," Bennett acknowledged when Arlian raised the concern. "But sharing factual information about Alliance protocols and perspectives isn't interference. It's resource utilization." The distinction was questionable by strict interpretation of his orders, but Arlian found himself accepting the role nonetheless. It provided access to higher-level ship operations and decision-making processes that would enhance his reports to the Alliance monitoring system. Yet, as his integration with the human crew deepened, Arlian became increasingly aware of a growing internal conflict. His training emphasized objective observation and detached analysis. His experience aboard the Aprillian, however, was teaching him that true understanding sometimes required a degree of participation. The humans operated on principles of mutual support and shared responsibility that could not be fully comprehended from a distance. Their strength came not from rigid adherence to protocols, but from a complex web of relationships and trust that allowed for rapid adaptation to changing circumstances. This realization troubled him. Was he compromising his objectivity by adopting, even partially, a human perspective? Or was he gaining insights that would otherwise be inaccessible? His reports became more nuanced, focusing less on deviations from Alliance standards and more on the functional outcomes of human approaches. He noted the efficiency of their informal problem-solving networks, the effectiveness of their leadership model that distributed authority based on expertise rather than rank alone, and the psychological benefits of their communal recreational activities. What he did not report, because he had no terminology to accurately describe it, was his growing respect for these chaotic, unpredictable beings. Their methods might lack the precision and predictability he valued, but they possessed a resilience and adaptability that was undeniably effective. Then came the day that would forever alter his understanding of both humans and himself. The Aprillian had entered a rarely traversed sector near the border of Alliance space, collecting data on stellar phenomena for both scientific research and navigational mapping. It was routine work, the kind of mission that usually proceeded without incident. Arleon was on the bridge, observing as always, when the proximity alert sounded. Unidentified vessel, bearing 047 Mark 23, reported Ensign Park from the tactical station. No transponder signal. Moving on, intercept course. Captain Bennett straightened in his chair. Composition. Unknown design. Mass consistent with medium combat vessel. Energy signatures? Unusual. Park frowned at his display. I'm detecting weapons capacitors charging. Shields up, Bennett ordered calmly. Open standard greeting channels, all frequencies. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, activating defensive systems while maintaining open communication attempts. Arleon observed with professional interest, noting how the atmosphere shifted from casual alertness to focused intensity without apparent anxiety. No response to hails, reported the communications officer. They're still on intercept, accelerating. Tactical assessment? Bennett asked. Park studied his displays. Unknown capabilities, but energy readings suggest significant offensive potential. Our shield should hold against conventional weapons. But he hesitated. Sir, there's something odd about their approach vector. It's almost like a violent shudder ran through the ship, cutting off his words. Warning signals blared across multiple stations. Direct hit, Park exclaimed. But there was no weapons fire. Some kind of phased energy projection, another officer reported. It bypassed our forward shields completely. Bennett's expression remained calm, but his voice took on a harder edge. Evasive pattern delta, return fire, targeting their propulsion systems only. The Aprillian banked sharply, acceleration pressing Arleon against his observation post. The view screen showed energy beams lancing out toward the attacking vessel, which executed an impossibly tight maneuver to avoid them. They're faster than they should be, Park muttered. And that weapons technology... Another impact rocked the ship, more violent than the first. Lights flickered, and several consoles sparked with power surges. Shields failing on decks C through F, reported the damage control officer. We've lost main power to the starboard sections. Bennett hit his communication panel. Engineering, status. Sato's voice came through, background noises suggesting frantic activity. Whatever they're hitting us with is disrupting power distribution. I'm trying to reroute, but we're losing systems faster than I can compensate. Arleon watched as the situation deteriorated with alarming speed. The attacking vessel wasn't just using superior technology. It was employing tactics specifically designed to disable rather than destroy. They were being systematically crippled. Sir, they're positioning for boarding. Park's voice had lost its professional detachment. Their weapon configuration is changing. Bennett's decision was immediate. All hands, prepare for potential boarding action. Security teams to access points. Encryption protocols, alpha for all sensitive data. Arleon's mind raced. The vessel's design, the weapons technology, the tactical approach, all suggested a level of sophistication beyond typical pirates or rogue elements. This had the hallmarks of a targeted operation by a technologically advanced force. The very type of entity the Alliance monitoring system suspected humans of communicating with. As the Aprillian shuddered under another attack, systems failing across multiple decks, Arleon found himself facing an unprecedented dilemma. His neural interface contained access codes to Alliance emergency protocols, including defense systems that could potentially counteract the attacking vessel's technology. But his directive was absolute. Observe only. Do not interfere. Bennett was shouting orders, coordinating defense efforts even as the ship's capabilities degraded around them. The crew fought to maintain critical systems, their earlier casual efficiency transformed into desperate determination. They were going to lose. The realization struck Arleon with cold certainty. Whatever this attacker was, it possessed technology specifically designed to counter human defense systems. Another impact, more systems failing. The bridge lighting switched to emergency backup, casting everything in a dim red glow. "Weapons offline," Park reported, voice tight with frustration. "Propulsion at 30%. We can't outrun them. Can't outfight them." Bennett stood amidst the chaos, his expression grimly resolved. "Prepare self-destruct protocols. We will not allow this vessel to be captured." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Around the bridge, officers exchanged glances of determination and fear, but no one protested the order. They would die rather than surrender. It was so typically, irrationally human, and suddenly, unaccountably, Arleon found he could not allow it. "Captain Bennett." His voice sounded strange to his own ears, too calm amid the emergency alarms and shouted orders. "I believe I can assist." Bennett turned to him, surprise momentarily overriding concern. "Observer? The attacking vessel is using phase-shifted energy projections to bypass your conventional shields. The Alliance has encountered similar technology. I have access to countermeasure protocols." Understanding dawned in Bennett's eyes. "That would violate your directive." "Yes." A moment of silence stretched between them, broken only by the continuing alarms and status reports from around the ship. "Your choice, Observer," Bennett said finally. "But make it quickly." Arleon's entire career, his identity as a meticulous follower of protocols and regulations, balanced against the lives of this human crew who had welcomed him, taught him, shown him perspectives he had never considered. There was no real choice at all. "I will require access to your shield modulation controls," he said, moving toward the tactical station. "And communication with Lieutenant Sato in engineering." Bennett nodded sharply. "Make it happen." What followed was a blur of activity as Arleon interfaced his neural implants with the ship's systems, transmitting Alliance countermeasure protocols to both the tactical station and engineering. He guided Sato through emergency modifications to the shield generators, explained phase shift detection parameters to Park, and provided Bennett with tactical suggestions based on Alliance encounters with similar technology. It wasn't enough to win the engagement. The attacker still possessed superior capabilities, but it allowed the Aprillian to protect its most critical systems and mount a more effective defense. When the attacking vessel unexpectedly broke off its approach and retreated at high speed, the bridge crew's cheer was tinged with disbelief and exhaustion. They weren't expecting resistance once our primary shields failed, Arleon explained, as they watched the attacker disappear from sensors. The countermeasures likely suggested we had capabilities they hadn't accounted for. Bennett studied him thoughtfully. "You violated your directive." "Yes." "Why?" Arleon considered the question carefully, aware that his answer would form part of the inevitable report to the Alliance monitoring system. The directive specifies non-interference in normal operations and cultural practices. This was an external attack by what appears to be a technologically advanced hostile force. Providing defensive information seemed appropriate. It was a rationalization, and both of them knew it. But Bennett merely nodded. "Well, I'm not complaining. You saved my ship and my crew." The aftermath of the attack brought frenetic activity, as damage control teams worked to restore critical systems and medical staff treated injuries. Arlean found himself drafted into the recovery efforts. His knowledge of Alliance technology proving useful in repairing systems compromised by the phase-shifted energy weapons. Hours later, exhausted but satisfied with the progress, he returned to his quarters to compose his report to the Alliance monitoring system. For the first time in his career, he hesitated over what to include. The attack itself needed to be reported in full. The technology involved represented a significant security concern for the entire Alliance. His own actions, however, in the end, professionalism prevailed. He documented his decision to share Alliance countermeasure protocols, acknowledging the violation of his non-interference directive, while explaining the extenuating circumstances. He noted that the attacking vessel's retreat suggested they had not expected to encounter Alliance defensive technology, which might indicate they had specifically targeted a human vessel believing it would be vulnerable. The report complete, he transmitted it through his neural interface to the secure Alliance communication buoy the Aprillian had passed the previous day. Then, he waited for the inevitable response. It came more quickly than expected. A priority transmission, directly to his neural interface, bypassing the ship's communication systems. Alliance monitoring system. Classification, highest priority. Recipient, Captain Arlean, Intelligence Division. Directive, immediate recall. Justification, violation of non-interference protocols. Transport, Alliance vessel, destined for rendezvous coordinates within 36 hours. Additional instruction, no further contact with human crew pending full investigation. Arlean had expected nothing less. The directive was absolute, and he had knowingly violated it. His career was likely over. His chances of advancement to the High Monitoring Council destroyed by his own decision. Yet, as he contemplated the consequences, he found himself troubled not by regret, but by an unfamiliar sense of rightness. The humans would have died without his intervention. That outcome would have been objectively worse than a violated directive. His thoughts were interrupted by the door chime. "Enter!" he called, quickly clearing the message from his visual display. Captain Bennett stepped into the room, looking tired but determined. Behind him came Lieutenant Sato, Commander Rivera, and several other senior officers Arlean had come to know during his time aboard. "Observer," Bennett began formally, then seemed to reconsider. "Arlean, we came to thank you properly for your actions today." "No thanks are necessary. Captain, I made a professional judgment in an extraordinary situation." "You saved our lives," Sato said bluntly. "All of our lives." "The Alliance will not see it that way," Arlean admitted. "I have received recall orders. An Alliance vessel will rendezvous with the Aprillian within 36 hours to transport me back to headquarters." The humans exchanged glances. A silent communication Arlean had learned to recognize, but still couldn't fully interpret. "And what will happen then?" Bennett asked. "An investigation? Possible disciplinary action? My career prospects will likely be limited going forward." Another exchange of glances. Then, Bennett stepped forward, placing something on Arlean's desk, a small metallic emblem bearing the insignia of the Aprillian. "This is a crew marker," the captain explained. "Every member of this ship carries one. It identifies you as one of us, no matter where you go." He paused, meeting Arlean's eyes directly. "It also entitles you to request asylum aboard this vessel, should you ever need it." The implication was clear, and utterly unexpected. Arlean stared at the emblem, Then at the faces of the human officers. There was no hesitation in their expressions. No doubt. They were offering him a place among them. "Captain, For once, precise language failed him. The Alliance would not look favorably on such an action. "The Alliance isn't standing in this room," Sato pointed out. "We are, and we take care of our own." "The choice is yours," Bennett added. "But know that there's a place for you here if you want it." After they had gone, Arleon sat for a long time, the crew emblem before him, the recall order still visible in his neural interface. He had spent his career observing, analyzing, reporting, always at a distance, always separate from the subjects of his studies. The humans had shown him another way of understanding, through connection, through shared experience, through trust. His directive had been clear: observe only, do not interfere. But perhaps true observation required something more than detached analysis. Perhaps it required participation, vulnerability, risk. Perhaps it required becoming, in some small way, part of what was being observed. The decision, when it finally crystallized, felt not like a conclusion but like a beginning. The Alliance vessel arrived precisely on schedule, a sleek, symmetrical craft that made the patched and modified Aprillian look crude by comparison. It took up position alongside the human ship, and a formal request for transfer of personnel was transmitted. Captain Bennett had gathered the senior staff in the main shuttle bay to bid farewell to their observer. The atmosphere was subdued, the humans uncharacteristically formal in their demeanor. Arleon stood before them, in his immaculate Alliance uniform. Posture, regulation perfect. Expression, carefully neutral. His few personal possessions had been packed and sat beside him in a standard-issue container. "The Alliance vessel has dispatched a shuttle," announced the duty officer over the communication system. "Docking in 5 minutes." Bennett stepped forward, extending his hand in the human gesture of respect and farewell. "It's been an honor having you aboard. Observer, your insights have been valuable." Arleon accepted the handshake, noting how the custom had become familiar rather than alien. "The honor has been mine, Captain. This assignment has been educational." "I hope the Alliance appreciates what you did for us," Sato added, her usual directness softened by genuine concern. "The Alliance appreciates adherence to protocols," Arleon replied, "but I find I cannot regret my decision." The shuttle bay doors began to cycle open, revealing the approaching Alliance craft, sleek, efficient, and utterly predictable in its design and operation. Just like the organization it represented. Arleon looked at the human crew gathered before him. Bennett with his casual authority, Sato with her intuitive understanding of technology, Rivera with her quick, adaptive tactical mind, and all the others he had observed and, gradually, come to respect. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and inefficient by Alliance standards. They modified protocols based on intuition, formed emotional attachments that influenced professional decisions, and regularly took risks that careful analysis would have deemed unnecessary. Yet, they had survived challenges that should have destroyed them. They had built a community that thrived despite, or perhaps because of, their contradictions. And they had offered him a place within that community, without hesitation. The Alliance shuttle docked with a perfect mechanical precision that suddenly seemed sterile rather than reassuring. "Captain Bennett," Arleon said formally, "before I depart, I wish to submit my final report on human operational methodologies." "Of course," Bennett replied, looking slightly confused by the sudden return to official business. "My conclusion is that humans cannot be properly understood through observation alone. Your species operates on principles that require direct experience to comprehend. Your strength lies not in adherence to established protocols, but in your capacity to adapt, to form connections, and to take calculated risks for mutual benefit." He paused. aware that what he was about to say would irrevocably alter his life's course. Therefore, to complete my understanding, I wish to formally request permission to join the crew of the Aprillian. The silence that followed was broken only by the mechanical sounds of the docked shuttle preparing to receive its passenger. Bennett's expression shifted from surprise to understanding to a slow smile. Permission granted, observer, or should I say, crewman Arlean. From the gathered officers came a spontaneous cheer, the kind of unrestrained emotional display that would never occur on an Alliance vessel. Sato actually stepped forward and clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture he had come to recognize as signifying approval and inclusion. What about the Alliance? Rivera asked, practical concerns tempering the celebration. I will inform them of my decision, Arlean replied. As a citizen of an Alliance member species, I have the legal right to seek employment aboard any vessel that will accept me. It was a technicality, of course. The Alliance monitoring system would view his decision as a betrayal, a violation of everything his career had represented. But the regulations he had so meticulously followed throughout his life did, ironically, provide this one avenue of escape. As the Alliance shuttle waited, increasingly puzzled by the delay, Arlean composed his final official communication. To Alliance Monitoring System. From Citizen Arlean, formerly Captain, Intelligence Division. Subject, Resignation and Final Report. I hereby resign my commission and all associated duties effective immediately. My final report on human behavioral patterns and operational methodologies is as follows. Humans cannot be controlled. They cannot be predicted with certainty. They cannot be confined within standard parameters. They are not subjects to be observed, but potential partners to be engaged. Their chaotic methods produce results that often surpass those achieved through rigid adherence to established protocols. I have chosen to continue my study through direct participation rather than detached observation. I believe this approach will yield insights of greater value than continued adherence to outdated methodologies. End report. With a gesture that felt both momentous and surprisingly easy, he severed his neural interface's connection to the Alliance communication network. The constant background presence of protocols, directives, and institutional oversight faded, leaving a silence that was both disorienting and strangely liberating. Inform the Alliance shuttle that there will be no passenger transfer, Bennett instructed the communications officer. Crewman Arlean has decided to extend his research mission indefinitely. As the puzzled Alliance vessel eventually departed, Arlean stood with his new crew, his new community, and watched the stars through the shuttle bay viewport. They seemed different somehow, less like points in a navigation chart and more like possibilities, each one unique and unexplored. So, Sato said beside him, practical as always. Where do we assign you? What can you do besides watch and take notes? Arlean considered the question. I have extensive knowledge of Alliance technology, communication systems, and protocols. I am trained in data analysis and pattern recognition, and I have recently discovered an aptitude for adaptive problem-solving in crisis situations. Bennett laughed. Sounds like you'll fit right in. Report to Lieutenant Sato tomorrow at 0800. I think engineering could use someone with your particular perspective. Yes, Captain. The formal acknowledgement felt different now, not the response of an observer to a subject, but of a crew member to their commander, a choice rather than a protocol. Later, alone in his quarters, now his permanent residence rather than a temporary observation post, Arlean removed the crew emblem from his pocket and placed it carefully on his uniform. The metal caught the light, the Aprillian's insignia a tangible symbol of his transformation. Outside his viewport, stars streaked past as the ship resumed its journey. To what destination? He wasn't entirely certain, and for the first time in his carefully ordered existence, that uncertainty felt not like a failure of planning, but like an opportunity. The directive had been clear: Observe only. Do not interfere. But sometimes, Arleon had learned, understanding required more than observation. Sometimes it required participation, connection, risk. Sometimes it required becoming part of the story rather than merely recording it. And as the Aprillian carried him into an uncharted future, Arleon found himself, unexpectedly, but undeniably, exactly where he belonged.